Connect with others through social and educational events, aircraft building and restoration, and your journey to becoming a pilot, including all the resources you need. As a member, you'll enjoy free access to more than 400 museums around the world, including our Aviation Museum right here in Oshkosh. Plus, you'll save on hotel and car rentals, aircraft financing and insurance, and purchases from Ford, John Deere, and more. Through it all, we work tirelessly to protect our members' rights. As your advocate, we make sure your voice is heard on issues like medical and flight test reform and other general aviation concerns. We hope you will consider joining us today. Visit EAA.org/joineaA together for an exclusive offer available to new members during Spirit of Aviation Week.
Welcome back to Broadcast Central. There's still much to come today on the Spirit of Aviation Week. At 5:15, Stream 1 features an air show performer profile with Kyle Franklin. At 6, Stream 3 features Mike Bush talking about your post-maintenance flight checklist. And also at 6, on Stream 1, Lieutenant Colonel Ross Frankemont looks back at his 14-year career flying the iconic U-2 spy plane and shares some amazing photos that he took from the edge of space. All event times are Central Daylight Time, and for a complete schedule, visit eaatogether.org. Remember, you can enter to win daily giveaways. Just use the hashtag EAAtogether and tag @EAA to your Instagram or Twitter post, and you'll automatically be entered into our random daily drawing.
I'm Steph Strickland with another installment of our EAA Together Spirit of Aviation Week content. This particular demo pilot is an amazing woman and a fantastic representative of all the great things the United States Air Force brings to the table. I want to introduce you now to Captain Kristin Baio Wolfe. She flies the F-35. How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm good. This has been a really weird year. You finally got to do an air show. So what was that like?
It was awesome. Our guys have just been itching to get on the road. We haven't been out of the state of Utah since March. So it's been awesome to get them out, just doing what they've been training to do. And we've been staying proficient here at Hill, but it's just not the same as getting to a different airfield, taking the jets on the road, dealing with those issues, and flying over a lake. So it was perfect.
How do you do that? How do you transition from the muscle memory of flying over the exact same, airfield, the exact same airspace, into finally getting to do what your training was supposed to do, which is teaching you to fly in unusual locations, so to speak?
Yeah, I mean, there's a bunch of different aspects to it. We don't get out of Hill in general that often anyways, being, non-demo pilots. So just taking a wingman on the road who hasn't really, taking this jet cross country, as we call it, that's a unique aspect. Landing in a different field with a runway that's, much shorter than ours here at Hill. All those aspects and dealing with weather en route is just one different challenge. But then when you get to the air show, not flying at a 2-mile long runway, we're flying in a 6,000-foot container. That's different over the water. I've never done that for a demo, and then I've never done a twilight show either. So all those factors thrown in there, it was definitely challenging. And then luckily I had Shiv there to help me out, ask him questions and bounce stuff off of him, being the most experienced guy there.
He is the A-10 demo pilot, and he's got a ton of experience. And I'm glad that you had someone who's like, all right, let me show you how this is going to go. I want to unpack a few things that you said, because we'll have a lot of folks who are watching this who are really interested in general aviation. And a fair bit of them have probably landed at EAA AirVenture, which is when you're flying in there with, the 10,000 plus airplanes that are coming in. It's a little dicey. Yeah. So I'm curious for you, you're coming into a runway that's much shorter than you're used to in a high performance jet. How does your sort of, final approach work? How do you put it down where you need to and get it stopped on time?
When we talk about it in the brief, we talk about, hey, this runway is going to be a lot narrower, a lot shorter than you're used to. And we run all the calculations as far as this is how long it'll take, how much distance it'll take you to stop, which our jet has amazing brakes, so it's not too big of an issue. And then if we have the gas when we get to the airfield, we do a couple low approaches just so you can get a visual of the airfield, what it looks like, and then bring it back around and finally land, come to a full stop. So it wasn't too big of a factor here. But definitely for somebody that hasn't been on the road a lot, from some of my wingmen, it's definitely a little bit of an eye-opener, not coming into a, like I said, 13,000-foot runway at Hill that we get lucky to land on every day.
Yeah, but it is kind of nice. You put a couple extra gallons in the tank, and you have a couple extra, the people when you're flying into a community absolutely love it if you've got to spend some time familiarizing yourself, burning off some of that extra gas, some of that extra weight.
Yeah, that's what we call it. Yeah, just doing some close patterns and some low approaches. The people at the field love it because they see the jets coming in, and I love watching even the A-10s do it when they were coming in. So it's just amazing to be able to bring a jet that most people at that airport have never seen in their entire life fly. So that was really cool to be able to land there and show the jet off.
Well, and that's the whole point of this at its core. It's designed to show people what taxpayer dollars are going to support and what the mission is. When you bring it into a community like that, and you have a chance to talk to the few people at the airport, because to be clear, this was not your traditional air show. It was a limited exposure, very sort of closely maintained from a safety perspective, given everything that's going on with COVID. When you were talking to the people who were there, what was their reaction in seeing this incredibly large piece of hardware, sitting there in front of them?
Yeah, it was a little bit weird, like you said, because the air show is over a lake. So I never actually went out to, go talk to the people that actually watched the air show, which is a little bit unique and different than, like, say, Oshkosh, and you flew right in front of them. So it's always touching when I get back. I flew the demo, flew the heritage flight, got back to the airport, did one low approach and one closed pattern, come in and land. And you have people come up to you and they're like, I was crying just seeing this plane come in and land. And you're like, I wasn't even doing the air show. I was just doing a low approach, and it just touches people to see that. And the cool part was we had tons of Warbirds out in the ramp at Tyler as well. So just to see old and new fighters right next to each other, seeing those Warbirds start up and then the F-35 start up, it's just a unique experience that most people don't ever even get to see.
What's your favorite Warbird?
I have to say the P-51 because I got to ride it in the back seat with BA, so got to pick that one.
That's solid. That's a good choice no matter what. I think most fighter pilots I talk to come up with that as their sort of preferred Warbird. When you're out there flying the heritage flight, how challenging is it to fly with an aircraft that is older and slower and has more maneuverability issues than, say, you do? What kind of process do you go through?
So obviously we go to our Heritage Flight Training Conference in February and March every year, so you get to get exposed to that and fly with the different Warbirds. And it's challenging, though, because every Warbird pilot also flies the jet differently, different airspeeds, different lines compared to the show container. So it's luckily we have a rehearsal day one, so we get there and I was flying with limiter in the P-51. You get to figure out like how tight or wide he flies his turns, what airspeeds he likes to fly the P-51. But it's a challenge because we've got so much excess thrust in the F-35 that and it takes a little bit to spool up as well. So you're jockeying the throttle around a ton, and you're at a higher AOA than you normally are flying 300, 350, 400 like I am in the air show. So
when you're doing that, I don't have much to relate it to, but when I had the good fortune to be in an F-18 and we were doing sort of a high alpha, and it was surprising to me how much the jet was buffeting around, either on the whatever the reason was. When you're at that sort of higher angle of attack than you're used to, what is it like is it still super smooth? Is the jet just automatically doing all the work for you, or do you find it to be a rougher ride at those slower speeds and less sort of immediate maneuverability?
Yeah, it definitely starts to buff it once I was practicing with BA the other day at Hill, and we get towards, in a turn down towards 190 knots, which is really slow for us. It's, a final turn type of airspeed, and up towards 20 alpha or 20 AOA. So the jet will start to buff it, and it's a little bit harder to stay on the outside of the turn with the power. Even if we have excess power, the more power I put in, the more the jet just wants to scoot in front of the P-51. So it's a challenge. And then when he rolls out, my jet doesn't slow down very quickly. It's pretty streamlined. So I'm back in idle with speed brakes immediately. So it's a challenge, but it's something we practice for. And like I said, luckily that rehearsal day hopefully makes the airshow day a lot better for everybody on the ground.
Everyone on the ground, honestly, the vast majority of people watching, it's magic no matter what happens. It's magic no matter how wide that formation is, no matter how tight, no matter what that turn looks like, because it's just cool to see those airframes all flying together. So I think sometimes those of you guys who are in the know really pay attention to the details, as you should, and the rest of us just think all of it's magic. So we're just happy to be there.
Fair enough.
Okay, so let's go back through your arrival and just talk a little bit about how you familiarize yourself with an over water show. So now you're finally on the road. You've got a chance. You're bringing some guys, off the base with you, and you've got to figure out what this terrain looks like over a lake. So how did you get yourself up to speed on that?
Yeah, we do a bunch of basic site study prior to even taking off from Hill. So I get the aerobatics containers. I know approximately how large it is, where it's centered around. I can do some map study there. And then we already know that we're going to be in a higher performing environment than we are at Hill. Up here we're at like 7,000 to 8,000 density altitude, but down at the lake you're at 0 to 1,000. So the jet just performs even that much better. So just going in with that mindset, and then hopefully if we have enough gas, like we mentioned, we can drop into the show site prior to even the rehearsal day. So we flew from Hill to Texas, and then the lake was only like 30 miles away. So we went and did a flyby of the lake. And people think it's for funsies and just showing off, but it's really for my wingman's back there, just making sure that I don't hit any, GA aircraft and kind of clearing my path for me. But I'm looking down, I'm looking at the show lines, figuring out, where is show center? How am I going to make this maneuver look the best to the crowd? So we do that the day before the rehearsal. And then for the rehearsal day, we got to go out there and do the full demo. And then we come back in, we watch the ground video, and we basically debrief it and say, all right, you need to move this, show left, show right. This was too far. You executed this in the wrong spot. And so all those debrief points, we kind of compile up for the air show day to make that performance perfection. So there's a lot that goes into environmentals as well. You mentioned over water can be a little tricky because depending on where the sun is, you're seeing the reflection of either the clouds above you. So you're seeing clouds above, clouds below, depending on what's reflecting. And then you don't get that same rush that you would with just normal ground environment coming up, because it's glass, water, or a windy day that can be tricking your eyes a little bit in relation to kind of what you're used to flying over. So that was challenging. The twilight was challenging. It was pretty humid and dusty out there over the lake. So it just looks like a bunch of smog over the lake, and the sun setting, so that reflects off the smog and the clouds a little bit in a weird way too. So that was all very interesting, and it's good to hear Shiv and Limit are talking about their experiences flying in those environments too.
Yeah, because if you've got clouds below, clouds above, or you have smog in general, even trying to set a visual marker on the horizon becomes challenging. You practice this. It's just fascinating to me. And I think to a lot of the folks who are watching, to try to think to themselves, like what that looks like. It's just a rare vantage that we get. I want to talk a little bit about your career path is super interesting to me, because you also have gotten to fly what is a lot of folks' other favorite fighter jet, which is the F-22. How long did you fly the F-22, and what was that like?
I did training in the F-22 for about 8 months, and then I did 3 years operationally up at Langley. It was a blast. It was a great first jet to be able to fly. Super lucky to go straight into the F-22 from pilot training. And then also, I consider myself really lucky because transitioning from the F-22 to the F-35 is probably the easiest transition you can make. Obviously it's 5th gen, so the stealth technology and the stealth tactics are very, very similar versus, we have guys coming from A-10 Strike Eagles, Vipers, you name it. They have all sorts of challenges working from, a plane with no radar, and they come into this and are now, expected to do full up 5th gen tactics. So I loved it, and it was honestly an easy transition. So, but I love the F-35 that I'm in right now. That's so fun being multi-role, going out, shooting the gun, dropping bombs, flying low level, and just doing all the missions that we can do.
Well, this is actually, you started to touch on it, but I want you to expand on it a little bit more, because when you see, I love our armchair quarterbacks. I'm one myself. I'm guilty of it as well. But I love hearing people go, oh, the F-22 is better than the F-35, or no, the F-35 is better. Realistically, these two platforms are designed to work together. And the analogy that I've heard, even from my friends at Lockheed who test fly these things, it's like a football team. No one player wins the game. It takes a team. And that is really what makes the F-22 and the F-35 unique. Since you've flown both, can you speak a little bit to that?
You're exactly right. So, they do a lot of the same things, and the sensors are very, very, very similar, and they have very similar software. But like you said, the F-22 is optimized for air-to-air, and then F-35 is optimized for air-to-ground. So honestly, I think they'll both be out there in any huge war that we have, particularly night one, because stealth technology is kind of where we're at these days. But I mean, the F-22 is optimized for dogfighting, so that's why you'll see the maneuverability, the huge excess thrust, and the ability to dogfight better than the F-35. But the F-35 has the ability to, generate coordinates via optical pods and IR sensors that the F-22 does not have. We have a lot more bombs that we can carry, so that makes us multi-role and useful in different ways that the F-22 isn't.
Well, and it also keeps everybody safe. I mean, that's what the goal is. The goal is to have a really good system in place where you understand the battle space. Knowledge, I don't know how you actually fly it. Here we go. I was just getting ready to armchair quarterback it. I think information's what ultimately wins the fight. Would you agree?
Oh yeah. I mean, if you can get information faster and first and better, then you're gonna be able to react first, which is our whole goal. It's the whole goal of being stealth too. The first person to see the other person and can shoot a missile before the other person even knows you're there, then that's an advantage that we hopefully have in both the F-22 and the F-35.
Well, we definitely, as always, thank you for your service and for your entire team who's out there working so hard. I want to ask you about what it means to represent being a female fighter pilot. And, ultimately the goal is to have the job be unremarkable. So it's not a female fighter pilot, you're just a fighter pilot, but there's still a uniqueness to it as we continue to sort of get more parity. What does it mean to you to be a woman in this role?
You're right. I mean, I always tell people that's probably the most often asked question I got on the road this weekend was, they let you guys fly this thing? They're like, yep, they do. And then the next question is, how many of you are there? And then you tell them, well, we've got 4 squadrons at Hill. There's probably about 90 pilots, and only 5 of us are women. So that kind of brings it to reality of, we're definitely a minority. But honestly, day to day, I tell people I don't notice it just because it's a merit-based system, and hopefully, if you're a fighter pilot and you can do the job, then that's great. But it's really cool, mostly to bring the jet and on the road. And this weekend I had a female pilot with me, and just see 2 chicks get out of 2 F-35s and to see people's face, and they're very confused, but also to see the young kids. So like either, ROTC cadets or people enlisting or anything to inspire them and to show them that, hey, you can do whatever you want in the Air Force or in the military these days. And proof is, we're doing it. So just to show people, because they don't really understand or I don't think about it until they actually see it right in front of them, is pretty cool.
Well, that's what we've been talking about. I mean, you become what you see. And so that's why it's, awesome that you're in this particular role, a high visibility role, even if this season's been a little, off because of all the COVID stuff. I want to now talk about your training that led up to this. Where I'm going to talk about the centrifuge. It is the thing that every fighter pilot I've ever talked to describes as the singularly most miserable experience, even more so than their survival training, which is usually really miserable as well. Tell me about training to become a fighter pilot and the centrifuge. The
centrifuge, I always say, is probably one of my most painful days of my life. I can't list off the other ones right now, but it's not an enjoyable experience. And you have to go before, so if you get selected on the fighter track to fly T-38, you have to go and do a 7.5 G profile. So that's your first exposure. It's not the full 9 G profile that you do if you get selected into the Raptor, the F-35, the Viper. But I mean, it's miserable. So a tiny little cap. You're going, they spin you around horizontally to induce those G-forces, but the capsule rotates as it spins around. And then as you slow down and they stop pulling G's, it rotates back. So a lot of people get very, very motion sick in that. So not only are you pulling G's and it's hot and you're stressed out and physically tired, but then you get motion sickness on top of that. And it's different pulling G's in that thing versus a plane. So typically, if I'm pulling G's in a fighter jet, I'm out there reacting to another fighter jet and trying to survive and dogfighting and focused on that, versus the centrifuge is literally just you in a little container pulling on a stick and just feeling miserable. So it's not fun.
When we've seen the videos, there's usually someone in your ear talking you through it. Is the purpose of this to teach you what to expect or how to react to it, or both?
Yeah, the purpose is to take you in like a benign environment where you're not in a multi-million-dollar fighter jet, and to one, prove to yourself that you can pull those Gs, validate that your technique of G straining and breathing is actually good and working, and then for them to provide feedback to you to fix any errors that you have in your technique. And their whole goal is they will not let you pass that training or leave until they are sure that you can go and pull 9 Gs and not G-lock in a fighter. So yeah, they have a physiologist. They're in your ear, or they're in a speaker, I guess, in the little container, and they're sitting there watching you on a camera, so they can see your technique, they can hear your technique, they can correct it as required, and they can tell you, get ready for the Gs, here's the profile you're going to be doing, and then you get out and you debrief your technique also. And if you have to get remedial training like I did, you have to go back in and do it again and practice your technique twice, which is always fun.
Which is always fun. She says in quotes.
Very sarcastic.
So when backing up even before that, what was your path into the Air Force? What airframes did you fly, and how did you find your way into the high performance jets?
Yeah, I didn't do much prior to joining ROTC, so I did a couple rides with my dad here and there in Cessnas and stuff. But getting ready for pilot training, I knew I'd have to go fly the DA-20 as part of our initial flight screening. So I went and did 2 flight lessons, or about 3 hours in a DA-20, kind of around where I lived, just to get a feel of the aircraft, kind of see where the instruments were, and what does it feel like to fly a general aviation aircraft, and what am I getting myself into. And then whenever you start pilot training, they send you to Pueblo, Colorado, and you do the DA-20 with actual instructor, where about 11, 12 rides later, you're soloing it. So that's a pretty cool event, from taking somebody 10, 11 rides, and then you're soloing the plane at the airfield. So that's the initial flight screening, and then you get back to your base and you do the full year-long pipeline of undergraduate pilot training. So I did that at Laughlin Air Force Base in Texas, and everybody starts out in the T6. So the T6 Texan, we do that for 6 months, and then you kind of get slotted into either T1, bomber heavy track, T-38s for the fighters, and then helos, excuse me. So T6s, T-38s, and then straight into Raptor after that.
What is the most important, where do you really need to shine if you want to become a fighter pilot? Is it the T6, the T-38? One of those has to be me. I don't know. Is one maybe more critical to really nail in your training?
Yeah, I would say all throughout, obviously, you want to do the best possible, because they take a conglomerate of all of your grades, whether it be flying performance, academic performance, your flight commander's grades, all that goes into one score. And then the highest ranked people get to pick which track they want to go on. In the regular pilot training bases, like I said, you can either go T-38s or T-1s. If you're at Shepherd, then everybody flies T-38s. So you have, at Shepherd, if you're flying the T-38, you have a whole year to kind of prove yourself and make sure that those grades are good. At all the rest of the bases, that 6-month point is either you're going T-38s or you're not. So that first 6 months is pretty crucial to make a good impression and make sure that you've got great, basically flying scores and academic scores.
When you talk about academic scores, for folks who are younger, who are watching this, who are interested in maybe joining the military and even, pursuing a fighter pilot path, what do they need to do in school? What helps sort of establish that baseline to give you the greatest chance of success?
Yeah, for applying for a pilot slot, that GPA also goes into that. So really what I tell people is pick something that you're passionate in, that you're going to do well in. Because if you try to pick something that you think the Air Force is going to like and you make C's and D's, then you really probably don't have a chance anyway. So we have people in my community and my squadron here that are every single major you could think of, whether it's history, science, chemist, physics, engineering, literally everything, sociology. So they picked something that they liked and they could get a good GPA in college. And then that is really just the GPA that goes into that score to be a pilot. Math and science helps in some aspects of being a pilot, because obviously we deal with numbers and science and fine instruments and stuff. But I tell you what, just pick something you're passionate about and do well at it.
I love that you could be a history major and pursue that. That's I didn't know that, honestly. That's outstanding. You mentioned your first sort of solo, and I recognize it was in the military, but can you take me back to that day when you realized that you're like, uh-oh, or maybe it wasn't, maybe it was like, hell yes, I don't know. Like what was that moment like for you?
Yeah, it was definitely terrifying because did not have much airplane experience, and I was mortified that they would take 11 rides in this airplane and just go put you in it solo and let you go take off and potentially kill yourself landing. So I was terrified. I mean, I think I did have a moment on a touch and go. I forgot to raise the flaps, and I'm like approaching stall speed and freaking out, and then figured it out because they just train you so well. Definitely bounced the landing a couple times, porpoise it down the runway. But it was great. And it's a feeling of accomplishment when you get down. You're like, all right, that really wasn't a big deal. They trained me so well, especially for the military training that they give you, that you're like, all right, I can do this. There's that confidence that you need to kind of continue into pilot training.
It's nice to know that a fighter pilot has about the exact same experience on their solo as the rest of us.
I was not good.
Glad to hear it. You also mentioned that you took some flights with your dad. And again, as I've sort of alluded to, a lot of folks watching this are pilots or student pilots, or, they're general aviation lovers. Tell me about flying with your dad and what that was like.
Yeah, it's something that, I didn't think it was a big deal back then because my dad always flew. I always saw him as a pilot, always saw him in a flight suit. But getting to sit alongside him and ride with him in the plane, I think I had my little sister in the back, was pretty cool because, you're like, oh, this is kind of what my dad does for a living, and hadn't really been on an airplane other than airliner. And then you just see that your dad's flying the airplane versus, some airline pilot taking you somewhere. So that's pretty cool. It's an experience that, a lot of people, like you said, don't get the opportunity to do, or some people are just huge general aviation lovers. But I always encourage people, if they think they're interested in aviation, just to get out there for at least a couple hours and see if you like it. And you don't have to have 100, 200 hours to be competitive to get a pilot slot in the Air Force. It definitely helps a couple hours here and there, but like I said, I had 3 hours that I put on there. So you can definitely do it. But enjoying aviation, especially general aviation, I'm trying to do that more as I'm here at Hill, especially as we have time off for COVID. But it's a blast.
Well, you've had a chance to go inverted with your friends and take some really cool flights. And so you're sort of one of us in the sense that you do love general aviation, which is great. And I hope that you have a chance to visit EAA AirVenture so you can see the absolute mind-blowing scale of the place. What did your dad do in the military?
He started out as a navigator in F-4s because his eyesight wasn't good enough, and then they relaxed the eyesight restrictions, so he applied and became an F-15C model pilot for the rest of his career.
How proud is he of you? What is your Thanksgiving like? I mean, I can't. Or do you get together as a family, and he just like?
Yeah, Thanksgiving is not pretty because I'm an Alabama fan and they're Auburn fans, and that's the weekend we play each other. So. But yeah, in general, I have to tell him to stop talking about airplanes and stop asking about air shows. He just loves to talk about it. I mean, he still flies in his job now out of the military. So that's his life. My mom hates hearing about airplanes, so we have to do it when she's not there, talk about it. But yeah, he loves it, and he's super proud, and he's just bummed he can't go to air shows this year either. So,
well, we're going to collectively cross our fingers for a smooth and uneventful season next year. And obviously there's still some shows on the back end of this year, and we're just all kind of in a holding pattern, waiting to see what happens. Outside of general aviation flying and outside of work, what do you like to do? What is it that you do in your downtime?
I'd say, lucky enough, I live in Utah. So whether it's summer or winter, I get to get outside and do so many different activities. So that's probably my favorite. Try to get hiking at least once a week, get out there on lakes, reservoirs, and just see the mountains and everything it has to offer. Other stuff, I'm a huge food addict and foodie, so I try to cook at least once, twice a week, make different things. Ironically enough, even before COVID, we were doing Skype cooking classes with my mom and my sister. So we'll all get on Skype, make the same recipe, and walk through it together. So we'll do that. And we do even more now since everybody's stuck at home during COVID. What's
your favorite sort of food? I'll get off this track because we're here to talk aviation, but I'm just going to ask this question because we haven't talked about this before. What's your favorite thing to cook? Are you like an Italian style, or what do you like to cook?
I like to stick to more Asian inspired stuff, but it could be Thai, ramen. I make my own sushi. anything Asian I love. I honestly love all food, so Italian's a close second.
I love it. If you were to give advice to someone watching this, or even better yet, advice to your younger self, what would you say?
To my younger self, I would say, think out of the box and explore, or just try to read up or, Google any sorts of careers out there that are available. I kind of kept a closed mind. I was like, well, I like math and science. I'll be a doctor, which is a great path. But I didn't really, think about it too much till halfway through college, which was almost too late because I was almost too far through to join ROTC. So that's what I would say. Open your aperture on what's out there and what you feel passionate about to do. And then kind of like we hit on earlier, advice for everybody out there is to, don't let one person tell you no. There's so many waivers and ways to get into aviation, whether it's in the civilian or the military world, and rules are changing literally every month, every week, as we need more and more pilots in the military. So don't let anybody tell you no. And then as long as you're doing well in every single part, physical, GPA, ROTC, that's what you're doing, then your chances are great to be a pilot or in anything aviation related to the military.
As we get ready to wind this down, I want to ask you about something that is sort of unique to the modern fighter, and that compared to, say, an F-15 or an F-16 or even an F-18, and that is there are no two-seat models in the F-22 and the F-35. So the very first day that you fly those jets is the very first day. Tell me about those experiences when the jet is yours in a very real way and you're getting ready to take off.
Yeah, luckily those flights went better than they did in my first solo in the ZA-20. But I think it's after going through so much military training and kind of the structure that they present material to you and make you, we call it demo pro, or they demo it and you show proficiency in it. By the time you actually get in those jets and take off, it's so, all the habits or everything that you've practiced just takes over and you don't even really think about it. So it sounds crazy. And honestly, we take, 12 to probably 14 simulator events, mostly practicing emergency procedures, takeoffs, landings, just very generic stuff. But the simulators are so good and so realistic that by the time you get in the jet, you're like, I think I've done this before. It's definitely a little different because you're obviously like dressed in all the flight gear, you're carrying your stuff, you actually feel the jet, hear it, smell it, you're out there in the heat. So that's a different dynamic, but it's always comforting because you've got an instructor out there right next to you in the other jet to ask any questions and tell you like, all right, you're good to go. Just take off.
How cool is the helmet?
It's really cool. It's a technology I didn't have in the F-22 because we just had generic, pilot training style helmets in the Raptor. So it's cool to come to this helmet, get, my entire head 3D modeled, my pupils measured to fit this helmet, just to fit my head, if you will. But I mean, the features that are basically up in the visor, so the HUD imagery, the video that can be displayed on the visor, the night vision that can be displayed on the visor, all that being integrated into one helmet is pretty cool. And honestly makes you so much more lethal in this jet than I could have been in the Raptor, when you can look around and see good guys, bad guys, target, and do all that. That's pretty cool.
It sounds amazing. It sounds very cool. Hey, I just wanted to say thank you so much for taking the time to speak to us and give us a little bit of an inside peek into what it means to, be the F-35 demo pilot, and especially with your history, also flying the F-22 and your military career. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
For everyone watching EAA's Spirit of Aviation Week content, we appreciate your time. Much more in store. Thanks for watching.